cloud. Okay. So yeah, it's a little too windy for this to be productive on the water class. 25 knots is too much to try rudderless for the first time. So we'll talk about it as much as we can. I have a PowerPoint presentation to go through all the points. Feel free to interrupt me at any point with questions if you want more information or clarification on anything. Before we get started, does anyone have any general questions about rudderless? We're going to talk about why we do it, how we do it, what you specifically do to make it work. I will share my screen.
For the senior test, I think rudderless is generally done in the JYs, is it? Because they're harder? Or...
Yes, it's harder. Rudderless in a quest is pretty easy once you know how to do rudderless. JY, everything's harder in a JY, pretty much. Okay, can people see that?
Yep.
All right. All right, so first the why. Why do we even do this? This isn't something you'll learn everywhere else you go to learn how to sail. But it comes in useful because at least once a year, someone loses a rudder. We were doing a cruise to China Camp, which is on the other side of the Richmond Bridge, and one of the ventures lost their rudder halfway there and had to sail back rudderless and get another boat. And they still made it to the beach and hung out with us. But it was a fairly non-issue because 2 seniors on the boat, and it's something we practice for that exact reason. It makes you a more efficient sailor. You can force a boat to do what you want with the rudder, but if you're doing everything right with sail trim and boat heel, the force on the rudder should be pretty light, and everything you do will just be faster and more efficient if you're using rudderless techniques while you do it. And a third reason, but it's fairly common, like sometimes you just need to let go of the tiller. Like I let go of the tiller all the time to deal with something. And if you know what the boat's going to do once you let go, then it's a non-issue. Let go of the tiller, let the main out a little bit so it doesn't round up and tack, and just deal with what you got to do and grab the tiller when you're ready again. This comes up a lot for me. I don't know why, but I just always find myself letting go of the tiller because I just don't need it at this moment. So if we don't need it, why do we have it? Can anyone give a use for the rudder that isn't steering the boat? There's 5 things. Someone call one out.
You can use it to slow down.
Right, it's a brake. That's one of them. If you push the tiller hard one way and then hard the other way, it goes sideways in the water and will slow the boat down. We don't do it a lot on dinghies, but it comes in handy on the keel boats. If you come in too hot for a docking, you can brake last second with the rudder. What else?
I imagine it gives it some lateral stability, just like the keel.
Well, kinda. It's not. Actually, that might be a 6th. I don't know if that's in my list. Stability is one of those things because it slows down oscillations if you're heeling. So yeah, that's a good one. I might add that to the list because I don't think that's one of them. Olaf in chat said sculling, which is one of them. You can use it for propulsion. If you take the tiller and you pump it back and forth really fast, it'll basically fan through the water. You're not going to go fast and you're not going to get upwind through the wind like that. But if you come in to a dock a couple feet short, you can scull your way the last few feet to get there.
I would also say it's more precise for steering unless you're really good at tillerless.
It is more precise, which is why we don't do rudderless racing. It's something I've always wished we could do, but that would just end up with demolished boats everywhere. But I've always wanted to try it. So it is more precise, but that's still steering. Like the primary use of the rudder is to steer. Heaving to you do need a rudder to heave to, but that's kind of steering because the purpose of the rudder and a heave to is to steer the boat upwind while the jib steers you downwind. Robert said something in chat about heaving too. So you do use the rudder for that, but that's mostly still falls under steering.
The boat is kind of designed to have the rudder down from a balance point of view, like the center of lateral resistance would move forward if you took it up, and the boat wouldn't be balanced anymore.
True. It adds weather helm when you take off the tiller, but a boat has weather helm anyway. So it just increases the existing weather helm by moving the center of lateral resistance forward. So you could design the boat without a rudder and just move the centerboard or the keel back to counteract that, if you wanted to design one without a rudder.
Right.
What do we got? Propulsion by sculling, braking, dampening effect of oscillation is a new one. So we have 3 more, I think, in my list. There's a big one that has to do with performance.
It allows you to go upwind better.
Yeah, it provides lift. You get lift off the rudder when you're going upwind, which helps you from side slipping too much. And what else? Oh, number 1, a big one that you use every day. It's a feedback mechanism. You can tell how your boat's handling based on the feel of the rudder, which if you ever try blindfold sailing, that's basically what you're feeling is the force on the rudder. If all of a sudden you get, because there's always a little bit of weather helm, so you're always holding the rudder a little bit towards you to stop the boat from rounding up into the wind. So you can feel if you're going down too far and your sails are too full, if the rudder gets really heavy, or if you're heeled over too much, the rudder gets really heavy. And likewise, if all of a sudden you lose all feel on the rudder, you're probably luffing up. So mostly it's a feedback mechanism. And if you're fighting the tiller because there's too much weather helm, then you know something's wrong and you need to fix it, which is where usually the rudderless techniques come in. Does that make sense to everyone? Yep. Provides lift like a centerboard because it's basically at an angle through the water to stop the weather helm. So it's basically acts like a second centerboard as far as providing lift upwind. The brake we talked about, propulsion we talked about. Heel control is a little more nuanced. And it's not something I've played around a lot with, but basically since it provides lift, if you're heeled over, and the rudder's like this, it's providing lift upwards. So depending on what you do with the rudder, it can make your heel worse or less, depending on what way you turn it to affect lift one way or the other. So you can, in advanced laser sailors will play with this some, but most other sailors I never really heard them talk about. But because it's providing lift, if you're heeled over, it's either increasing or reducing lift. Does that make sense? We're not going to go too deep into that one. But if anyone has questions on that one, we can expand upon it.
About the using of heel control, can you? I don't understand how that would. So you're trying to reduce the heel by, say you're heeled over really far and you pull the rudder. To reduce your heel, you would have to push the tiller away from you, effectively pointing your nose higher at the same time. Is there any way to decouple those?
I have to think about that, but yeah, it's counterintuitive to what you would want to do with the rudder at the time. So it's mostly something to be aware of when it's happening, because throwing the rudder over one way can create so much lift it forces you into a capsize. But I always have to think about it because it's not really something you can do much with it. So if you're heeled over,
Trying to right the boat, that would be still pulling the nose up,
Right.
which if you're going to weather, then that would also,
correct.
once you get like above close haul, then your nose would then heel would nominally reduce anyway when your sails stall.
Right, as soon as the sail stalls, you come back up. But depending on what you're doing at the rudder and the centerboard when you're heeled over are providing lift and making you want to capsize even more.
Oh,
So if you can do something because if you're heeled to leeward, the wind's coming this way. If you're heeled to leeward, you have lift on the centerboard generally this way. So if you're heeled over, it's upwards. So it's kind of forcing like this, which is why one of your reefable points is with your centerboard. You can lift a dagger board or pivot a centerboard back to reduce centerboard area, and it'll reduce lift, which you'll side slip more, but if it helps you stand up more, it can be advantageous, which is a whole separate conversation. But if the rudder is the same and you're heeled over and the rudder is producing lift to capsize, you could let go of the tiller so the rudder straightens and is no longer providing lift, and it would reduce that action. So like I said, very nuanced, and probably a whole series of classes in itself to practice it and try to feel it. And honestly, I've never really gotten good enough at that nuance to make a difference. But it's something the rudder does, so we have it in the list. And now I have to add. Yeah, go ahead.
And then making the balance the same between center of lateral resistance and center of effort.
Right. Sorry,
Okay, I just want to
I
make sure.
missed the first half. Oh, we're going to be talking about that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I have a question that might lead to another reason for the centerboard. If you're going downwind in a race, you lift your centerboard, but nobody ever lifts the rudder.
It's really hard to go dead downwind without a rudder.
So yeah. So I guess that would lead me into that's where a rudder is very good when you're going downwind.
Well, that still comes just back to steering.
Back to steering.
Help you steer downwind. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any more on these? All right. So how does this work? All right. This is we're going to be talking about center of lateral resistance and center of effort. So if you think about the centerboard as the pivot point, that's what's considered the center of lateral resistance. That's what's stopping you from going sideways. It's not exactly on the centerboard because the whole hull reacts with that as well, because the whole hull is stopping you from being pushed sideways. But in general, it's around the centerboard or keel of a boat. When the rudder's in the water, it's a little further back because the rudder is added to it. But once you lift the rudder, pretty much the boat pivots around the centerboard. So then if you think about that with the sails, if you sheet in on the main, or if the wind pushes on the main, it wants to spin the boat upwind. And counter to that, if there was no main and it was just a jib, when the wind hits the jib, it's going to push the bow down and spin you downwind. So basically, you're playing with the two sails, in on the jib, in on the main, depending on if you want to head upwind or downwind. And practicality, usually what I do is just cleat in the jib and don't worry about it and only play the main. Because I'm not racing, I don't need perfect sail flow on the jib to get where I'm going as fast as I want, as fast as I can. And it's easier just to play the main, which we'll discuss later. Does that make sense? That's kind of the more straightforward one. So then second is heeling as a turning mechanism. If you felt this, if a boat heels, if you get a gust and the boat heels to leeward really hard, it wants to round up on you. And that's when you have to start fighting with the tiller. So if you're rudderless, you can use that to your advantage. If you want to head up or go into attack, you let the boat heel to leeward and it'll round up for you. And then counter to that, if you want to get downwind, you can let sails out, let the boat heel you backwards to windward, and it'll round down. Does that make sense? Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I guess I'm struggling with the why that happens, because I would think that the lower side being more in the water would create more drag, which would do the opposite.
The why, that'd be a good question for John, because he also does that when kayaking. But when the side of, if you heel to leeward, that side of the boat's curved, so it presents a different wetted surface area to the water than the windward side would, which would be more straight along the bottom of the boat. So something about those effects on the water cause it to carve a circle through.
Okay.
And I don't know if it has to do with faster flow on one side than the other, or more drag on one side than the other. But it's just true for any boat I've ever tried it on, except for multi-hulls. Multi-hulls are their own beast. All right, any more on those? All right. So how do we actually do it? What do we do when we go out there? First thing you want to do is reduce weather helm, because all boats are designed with a little bit of weather helm by default for several reasons, both so you can have some feedback on the tiller. If it's like just completely neutral, then you can't feel anything. So a little bit of weather helm is useful. A little bit of weather helm also helps you get the get some lift off the rudder by having it a little bit off center. Hang on, someone's in chat. Oh, John. Oh, he doesn't know the why either. Well, we should look into that, the why that happens. But yeah, same thing happens in a kayak. So boats are designed by weather helm. So in order to do rudderless, you want to reduce that weather helm. Otherwise, you're just going to keep tacking back and forth, because as soon as the main powers up, you'll round up. So a couple ways to do that. First, reef the main. If you have less main, then you have less wind on the sail, pushing the boat up into the wind. So the first thing to do if you know you're going to go out and practice rudderless is just reef the main. On some boats, that's enough. Like on the Quest, that might be enough. But if there's still weather helm, then just raise the centerboard. Since our centerboards pivot, if this is the center of lateral resistance, if you pivot it, all of a sudden it moves back. So now you have more sail in front of it than you did behind it. So you can play with that. So if you pivot it back like a third, raise the centerboard like a third of the way, that really reduces weather helm. On the Quest, which I would recommend starting on the Quest because it's so easy. Usually you don't have to do both. If I'm going to do rudderless on a Quest, usually I'll just pivot the centerboard and not worry about reefing unless it's windy and I'm reefed anyway. And then if I'm reefed, I usually don't have to mess with the centerboard. But if you find yourself heading up a lot and accidentally tacking, which is usually one of the early problems with rudderless, is you just keep accidentally tacking back and forth, then do both those things. Does that make sense as far as why that affects weather helm? Okay. Practice alone. So this is counterintuitive, but a lot of what you're going to be doing has to do with healing the boat to make it go where you want. And most sailors, me especially, I'm really bad rudderless crew, because if the boat heals, I'm going to make it stop healing. Like my body can't not jump to the high side if the boat suddenly heals. So I will just screw up everything you're trying to do on the boat. It's really hard for me to just sit in the middle of the boat and not do anything. So it's best if you can just go out there and practice alone. Okay, Ben's taken off for 10. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say about that, but yeah, it'll be easier if you're the only one in the boat, so other people aren't screwing you up. All right, so yeah, it's too much to worry about both sails, and really it's unnecessary. You don't need perfect sail trim to get where you're going rudderless. Like you're just trying to get home, or in this case, you're just practicing. But generally, if this happens to you in the real world, you're just trying to get home. You're not racing home, and there's no real reason to play with the jib. Yeah, John says the better the sailor, the worse they'll screw you up. That's pretty true. If they're in your boat with you. So what I do is pull the jib in all the way, let it out a few inches, and cleat it, and don't worry about it the rest of the time until you tack or jibe and you have to switch sides. And I'll talk about why the 2 or 3 inches in a bit. But then all you need to do is worry about the main. Okay, so that's what we do with the boat. So if you're going out, you set up the boat and you head out. Now what? So sit on the side of the boat like normal and take one of the falls. Don't take the main sheet where we normally hold the main sheet, and don't grab all the falls. Just grab one of them. And if you play with one, on most of our boats, the main sheet is a 4-to-1 purchase, which is just too slow to react to things by working with that. Like if you need to sheet in, it just takes too long to get the main in to make it react as quickly as you need to. And then all the falls is kind of too gross of a movement, and also it's hard to do if you're hiking out if it's windy. So if you play with each of the 4 falls, 4 cascades, one of them is a 2-to-1, which is pretty ideal for what we want to do. So check them all, grab the one that's 2-to-1, take it with you, sit on the side of the boat, and just try to keep a straight line. Like that's the first goal that you're going to do when you go out there, because you're going to oscillate. The main's going to fill, it's going to round you up, you're going to dump the main, you're going to round it back down before, so you don't jibe, you're going to sheet in the main again, and it's going to round you up, and you're just going to head towards like the Emeryville trees and like this, and your goal is to get this smaller and smaller, and just go in a straight line. I will say, if you just let the main out all the way and keep the boat flat, it'll get onto a beam reach and sail pretty straight on a beam reach on its own, if you can keep the boat flat. But you'll eventually end up downwind by doing that, heading towards the rocks by beam reaching back and forth. So you need to head upwind and get on a close reach. You can't really close haul rudderless. You can for a moment, but at some point you're either going to go up too far in luff and then fall off again. So your close reach is kind of your goal. Just get upwind as efficiently as you can. It'll take a while because you're not going to be doing 90-degree tacks, but just try to head upwind and keep the boat going as straight as possible. To do this, watch the bow. Like we usually say, don't use the horizon because it's a horrible reference point. Like you shouldn't be looking at the horizon for tack points or where you are and where the wind is. Like you should know where the wind is, not that you're pointed at Campanile. But in this case, it's a good reference point for knowing how much you're oscillating. Because when you're looking at yourself against Emeryville and you're going towards the buildings and then up past the trees and then back towards the buildings, it's very apparent how much you're oscillating. So your goal is to reduce that. So if you're looking at your bow against the horizon in front of you, it's a little easier. Is it easier to avoid by sailing fast or slow? You kind of only have one speed rudderless, because you're going to be luffing the main off and on to keep a course. Because when the boat heads up, you let the main out a little bit to let it luff, and the bow gets pulled back down, and then you pull in the main again to stop it from falling down too much. So you're kind of like always in out on the main. So there's not a whole lot you can go for speed. So I don't know if one's easier or the other. It just kind of is what it is, depending on the wind. So the hard part for this is anticipating what the boat's going to do next as far as stopping the oscillation. So if there's any amount of waves, the waves are going to heel you as you go over them. So if the boat heels to leeward, you know what it's going to want to do is round up. So you know what you have to do to stop that is to let the main out, to reduce the rounding. So instead of the boat heels, the boat rounds up, you let the main out, the jib pulls the bow back down, and then you pull the main back in to keep going again. As soon as the boat heels, let the main out. Don't wait for the round up to react. Like so you're playing the main against the boat heeling one way or the other. If you heel to windward, pull in the main because the boat's going to round down. So you want to anticipate what the boat's going to do and react with the main before that happens. And that's how you stop your oscillation. So that's the hardest thing, and why one of the things rudderless is so good for is just getting a feel for the boat and knowing what the boat's going to do before it actually does it. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Does anyone have questions about that part? All right.
I actually have one question. It
Yeah.
kind of combines the last 2 slides. One of the things that I think John mentioned to me was the idea of backwinding the jib to give it a little more power to pull the nose down. And that lets you put a little more power on the main. And just, I thought the dynamics were pretty good with the jib backwinded a bit. Have you explored that, or?
We'll get into backwinding when you're trying to fall off below a beam reach. I wouldn't backwind to let me use more main. If you want to go faster, if I want to go faster, what I'll usually do is heel the boat to windward, which then makes the boat want to drive down. but then that lets me give it more power in the main
Mhm, mhm.
to counteract that, and that can help you keep power in the main without rounding up, I guess, would be the goal to go faster, is just in general, is if you can keep the main powered but not round up, then you can sail a fast straight course. And the only way to do that is to heel the boat to windward a little bit to counteract the main being powered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was exploring backwinding the jib, and I kind of liked it. I'm trying to remember the other values it had. It might have helped dampen oscillations a bit, but I can't actually remember about that. I don't know, John, if you, let's see. John's got some comments.
Yeah, on a JY, when it leans, it really wants to tack.
Yeah.
So backing the jib helps.
Okay.
I mean, that makes sense. If you're accidentally tacking a lot, you could back the jib to help counteract that. But I would say there's other things you could do before that. But he is right, on a JY, as soon as a JY starts to heel, it wants to round up, which we'll talk about on the next section on tacking, because the different boats tack a little differently. All right, who's got more questions on this one though? Okay. Hacking tips. Eventually at some point you're trying to go a straight line to Emeryville, but you got to come back. So you're gonna have to tack back. And you want to tack before you jibe, and we'll talk about it during the jibes later, but tacking is way easier rudderless than jibing is. So start with tacking, and then once you have tacking and general boat control down, you can start playing around with jibing. So first off, don't try to tack from a close hold like we normally do. Because as soon as you head up from a close hold, your sails depower. And if you have a rudder, that's fine, because you can force steer the boat through the wind before it loses all its speed. But without a rudder, you can't really force turn it that fast. So what you want to do is fall off onto a reach, maybe a beam reach, but just get down from a close hold course and get some speed. And then sheet in, let the boat heel as you sheet in, like as you sheet in the main, the boat's going to want to heel to leeward, let it, because that's going to make it round up, and get it turning. And boats get like turning momentum. Like once they start turning, they want to keep turning. You have to stop them from turning once they get started. So if you're down on a close haul and get the turn started before you even, or if you're down on a close reach and get the turn started before you even get up to a close hold, you're at a good position. Like you're already halfway there. Leave the jib. Don't worry about that till after the tack. Let it backwind as the nose comes through the wind. Let the jib backwind. It'll help you finish the tack. And then after you're through the wind, proper the jib, sheet in the main to stop the turn. Because otherwise it'll keep falling off into a jibe depending on the wind. So once you're on the other side, you want to sheet in the main, get the turn stopped. And this is where I mentioned earlier, you don't worry about the jib, sheet it in all the way, let it out a few inches and just keep it there. So that comes into play with the tack. So what happens is you're on a close reach, both sails are powered, you're accelerating, you're pulling in the main, letting the boat heel, coming up to a close hold. If the jib's out a few inches, the jib will depower just a second before the main. And what that does is it doesn't depower long enough for you to like slow down, but it depowers and stops the bow from getting blown down. And now all of a sudden you have the main powered without a jib that accelerates the weather helm roundup. So as you're speeding up through a close hold, all of a sudden the jib depowers, your main, you're still holding your main in and you're heeled over, and it just accelerates you through the tack. Once I started doing all these things, I haven't missed a tack since. But you're going to miss a lot of tacks. So start tacking before you need to, especially if you're coming back towards the clubhouse and getting close to the restaurant or the novice area. Start your tack further out than you normally would, because it might take you a few tries to get it. All right, who has questions about this one?
One of the problems I've had is it healing too much.
Oh, yes,
so
good. Yeah, this is where the JY versus Quest thing comes in. So, and in general, healing the boat, you want to let the boat heal to start to make it round up, but you don't want to heal too much. Basically, with all our boats, if you bury a rail, it'll slow down. Like it might still be rounding up, but it's gonna, as soon as a shroud hits the water, it's gonna stop. like the boat's just going to come to a stop. And the JY gets turning sooner, so you don't have to heal a JY as much. Basically, as soon as you heal a JY a little bit, it'll turn. It's really easy to make turn. The quest, you have to heal more aggressively before they will start rounding up, which is part of the reason they're more forgiving, because they can be getting tossed around in the water and they're still going to keep a fairly straight line. A JY, once you get in waves, rudderless, and as the boat's healing, it's just rounding up and down on its own all the time. So that's one of the reasons it's good to start with a quest. But for tacking a quest, you have to really let it heal a lot, but don't let the rail go in the water.
So you just sort of do it a little bit more gently to gradually get the heal, pulling in the main a bit more gently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all pretty gentle. Because if you're starting on a like low close reach or a beam reach and heading up, you're not just pulling the main to center line and trying to make it round up as fast as possible. You're trying to keep speed, keep an even heel, and speed your way into the tack. So yeah, you can take it slow and get a feel for how much the boat's healing. For a quest, take it almost until the rail's touching the water, and then try to hold it there through the tack. And ideally, so what you need to do, which you haven't mentioned this yet, after the sails depower and you're above a close hauled, you need to keep the boat heeled. Because as soon as the sails depower, you don't have the main anymore helping spin you up into the wind. The only thing continuing the boat turning through the wind is the heel of the boat. So as you head up towards a close haul, get the boat heeled. As soon as the main depowers, you need to get your weight over there to the low side and keep the boat heeled as it turns through the wind. All right, what other questions on tacking? All right, and we can always circle back to stuff if you think of questions later on any of this, and we're going to have general questions at the end for as long as we need. Jibing. All right. So the first thing about jibing, you're going to capsize a lot. Jibing is not easy, especially in higher winds. Once it's over like 15, it's a wet and wild ride trying to get through a jibe. So first question, how do you get below a beam? Because if you fall off by letting the main out, like normally to fall off, you let the main depower, the jib pulls the boat down. But once you get down to a beam, the main powers itself back up again because it can't go out anymore. So as soon as you hit a beam, the boat's going to like stabilize and not want to fall off anymore. So how do you get below a beam? Open question, not hard.
Back the jib.
Backing jib helps, but not the primary way, because you're still gonna, at some point, the back jib will provide a little more power to the bow to fall down, but at some point the force on the main is still going to stop you.
Lean to windward.
Lean to windward. So you want to get the boat heeling to windward, sometimes hard and far, to get the hull driving down. So heel hard to windward. And sometimes if it's windy, that's not enough. Backing jib helps, but sometimes what you have to do is get up on a close reach, dump the main, and which when you dump the main, the boat will want to heel to windward. If you're sitting on the side of the boat, the boat will start driving down really hard without the main powered, and just let it drive down past a beam reach towards a run. So what happens is it drives down slow, and you can tell you're fighting it. You're fighting the boat's desire to spin upwind with the main powered, and you're forcing it downwind with your weight out, driving it towards heeling to windward and driving it downwind. When it gets close to a run, like right when you get to a run, all of a sudden everything changes and it will start turning fast because of the heel on the boat. So you're going to be driving down, trying like fall off, waiting for it. It's slowly falling off. And then all of a sudden it's going to turn fast through dead downwind. So you have to be ready to jump across when that happens and duck, because you might be driving down fast enough that you're going to crash jibe. So always duck when you're going through jibes. And then as soon as the boat jibes and spins around, try to hike out, because it's immediately going to want to round up. And that's when you're going to capsize most of the time. Like sometimes you just don't have enough control without the rudder to stop the roundup after the jibe. But the goal is to jump across as fast as you can and get your weight out on the far side. And usually that involves like on your stomach, like hanging out over the side as much as you can, to try to get the boat to flatten out to stop the roundup. And ideally, as soon as you're heading towards a run, and the boat starts accelerating fast, that's when you want to kind of grab the falls and throw the main across as you're crossing the boat and jumping to the other side. And if you get the timing right, you can do a controlled jibe and get over fast enough and get the boat flat to stop it from continuing to turn. All right, what questions we got about that? Nothing. This is the hardest part of rudderless.
Is sailing on a downwind course, like sailing on a run, an option for like?
Yes. Yes, actually, it's a good thing to practice. I think I have it later in these slides, as one of the things to practice. Because once you get down to a dead downwind, forces on the sails really mellow out, and it's not trying to round you up as much, and you can really control the boat with heel. So it's one of the goals once you get comfortable with rudderless is get dead downwind and try to wing on wing, pull the jib across, and being wing on wing is a good visual indicator in front of you of if you're dead downwind, if you can keep both sails happy. So that's one of the more advanced goals. It's really hard in waves and big wind and waves because the waves toss you around so much. But if it's a reasonably calm, like 12-knot day and the winds aren't really big, it's really satisfying to stand in the back of the boat rudderless and just use your weight to keep the boat going straight. And it can be done. Yeah. Right. Any other questions about jibing? All right.
I have a quick question, like.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're trying to keep the boat flat, but as you jibe the main to the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Normally, you're trying to you have your weight normally on the other side already.
Right.
Compensate. And is that like the tricky part to get that? You don't want to be there. You don't want to be there too early at that point.
And it's a timing thing, and it's a really fast timing thing. Because like I said, once you get close to a dead downwind, it's really easy to make the boat turn. So you're going from fighting the boat, forcing it to turn, heeling the boat to windward, to all of a sudden it's ready to go, and it's going now. So it's a really fast timing thing to, as soon as you feel the boat speeding towards a jibe, get your weight in and flatten it and try to stop her from turning so fast, and then get on the other side as it happens, as the jibe, as you come across. It's a timing thing, and it's a really hard thing to learn and feel. But yeah, the goal is to keep the boat flat through the jibe and after the jibe. Dead downwind, raise the centerboard. I would not having a centerboard changes the behavior of rudderless, because you no longer have the pivot point. So even if you're going downwind, you're not racing. Like racers raise the centerboard because it's drag and you don't need it if you're going dead downwind. But it's not like detrimental to anything. And then if you're doing rudderless, if you get rid of that pivot point, the behavior of the boat changes drastically. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend raising the centerboard. All right, other questions on jibing? All right, crew overboard. Crew overboard sounds really hard, but it's not that big of a deal. The main thing is once you can hold a close reach course, a straight line on a close reach course, which is the first thing we said we need to be working on, then doing that to a person in the water isn't that overwhelming. You don't need to come to a complete stop. Like, you're not slow sailing like we do normally, because you can't really slow sail rudderless without affecting steering. Like you can't control your speed and your steering very easily while rudderless. And your main concern with rudderless is to steer a straight line. So you're not, I don't want to be in the water and see a boat going like this coming at me. So you don't need to come to a complete stop. Just be able to, like we do curve board with bottles normally. So just if you can snag it out of the water, like that's good without hitting it. Like that's doing pretty good. Yeah, basically just get on a close reach, keep a straight line to the person. And then to slow down, at the last second, just blow both sails and then control the boat with heel. Like blow both sails and keep the boat flat, and it'll pretty much just go straight and it'll slow down as you get there. Not that big of a deal. And don't hit them. That's the main thing with any crew in the water. Number one, don't hit them. Any questions on that? All right, final stuff. Yeah, we talked about this. Once you can get through some jibes without capsizing every time, see if you can go dead downwind. If you can, that obviously makes your jibes much easier, because if you can just get to a dead run and just hold it there, then you can just jibe at your leisure. But getting to a dead run and holding it there is tricky. Oh yeah, we no rudderless at the dock. Get out past the restaurant, then raise your rudder. If you lose your rudder, obviously you need to get back to the dock without it. And if you bang into it, that's fine. Like no one's going to expect a perfect docking rudderless, but it's not something we practice because it's just too prone to error. If you want to practice docking, do it with the race buoy or the windsurfer buoy that's always out there in the novice area, and just see if you can come up to it and just touch your bow to it as you come to a stop. All right.
I have a question on jibing.
Yeah.
Is it easier, instead of having your main out all the way and jibing it to the other side, isn't it easier to pull it in first a little bit, so that when it whips to the other side is less of a blow to the whole hull?
It'll round you up. If you start shooting in the main, it'll round you up. Since you're rudderless, like you can't counteract that. But that's why ideally, like even though it happens fast, like even though the boat's going to round through the jibe fast until you get better at controlling a dead downwind run, the goal is to still know when that dead downwind point is and cross the boat as you're pulling the falls across and controlling that jibe. Like you don't want to just let the boat go through the turn and crash jibe. It's bad on the rig. It's not safe for you if you don't get your head low enough. So the goal is still to do a controlled jibe like we normally do with a rudder. You just have to do it really fast as you're crossing the boat. But if you tried to fall off and sheet in the main, you'd kind of end up fighting yourself on it. You can get to a dead downwind and then sheet in manually, keelboat style. Because on the keelboats we don't grab the falls, we sheet in through the block, but you don't really have to on a dinghy.
So
Yeah.
for sake of practicing this jibe, you try to go on a dead run first, right?
If you can, but it's hard to get there. So yeah, if you can. So like I mentioned before, getting below a beam is work. Like you have to force a boat to get onto a broad reach. So you're gonna be, if there's any amount of wind, if it's blowing like 7 knots, you can kind of just force the boat to do what you want with heel, because there's not that many forces on the sail. But if it's in the teens or higher, you're gonna be hiked out hard, trying to force the boat to do something at once and try to get it below a beam reach. And you're going to be hiked out hard, and then all of a sudden it's going to hit a point where it just rounds really fast through the wind. So the goal is to like know that's coming and anticipate it and jump in fast and get on a dead run, and then catch your breath and then do the jibe controlledly. But it's going to be a while before you get there. You're going to have a lot of fast fast jibes through a roundup in a capsize. Like even once you're good at it, like if you have a 50% success rate on a high wind jibe, that's doing really well.
I had
To
a
get-
question.
to get-
Sorry, Giles, you go.
I was just gonna ask a bit to get on dead downwind. The idea is just you start it going down, and then you just get your weight quickly to the side and just try and get it before it goes across.
Yeah. So you're hiked out hard, and then when you feel the boat start to speed up and it's turned downwind, get your weight into the middle. And then
Okay.
you're probably going to get your weight into the middle too soon, and then it's going to round back up, and you're going to have to start all over again. It's really hard to hold a controlled course downwind because the main's just always powered trying to round you up.
Thanks.
Is it possible to rudderless a laser?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've done that. I think I did do it once. It was really light wind though. It was like 7 knots, so it wasn't hard. I was just seeing if I could do it, and it was really, I don't know how hard it would be in heavy wind, but
Is the center, well, a non-pivoting centerboard and no jib would be the obvious differences.
right.
It takes
So
away a couple of your controls.
yeah, so even if you raise the dagger board, you're still not changing your center of lateral resistance much, so you're still going to have weather helm. So I'd imagine what you'd have to do is constantly be hiked out, heeling the boat to windward to get it to one around down, and then playing that against the main to steer. But yeah, I've never tried it in high wind.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Any more general rudderless questions or general, any other questions?
I did have a second one.
Yeah.
How would you sail backwards rudderless?
I feel like I've tried that, but it's been a long time. It's tricky because you don't get steerage from the hull heel for a while. You probably could with backing the main one side and then the other to keep a straight line. John would probably be able to answer that one more because he's way better at sailing backwards than I am. Yeah, I think you could. Because you're just gonna point up into the wind. Like you're gonna go into half attack. Once you get head to wind, you're gonna try to heel the boat to keep yourself dead to wind. But then once you come to a stop is always where backward sailing gets tricky, because if you're not straight up wind, then the wind's gonna catch the bow and blow you one side or the other. But yeah, if you back the main, the tricky part is you're gonna have to be ready to like back the main to one side and then hurry up and back it to the other side if you start to turn too much one way, which is really hard to do until you get going fast. I don't even know if you get going fast enough to be able to use boat heel to steer, honestly. So yeah, I don't know, possibly. Oh, John says you can do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, John says you can. Yeah. What else? Any questions? General questions? Non-rudderless questions? Well, you got a good bunch of sailors on the line.
Can I ask what the senior test sort of looks like for what sort of expectations there are for rudderless sailing?
Yeah. Generally circles and crew overboard are the big ones. I think I probably did a couple tacks, but tacks aren't really that hard. I can't remember if I had to do high speed jibes. Okay, yeah, 5. I'm being told 5 high speed jibes in a row without capsizing. So yeah, you do want to get a little bit jibing, but if it's pulling 20 knots, that's a big ask. I don't even know if I could pull that off. Expand a bit on weather helm. Which part? There's a lot to be said on weather helm. Like why there's weather helm or how to reduce weather helm. Oh, how the centerboard affects weather helm. Oh, yeah. Let's go back to boat diagram. There. So the boats are designed so that the center of lateral resistance is a little bit. What? The center of lateral resistance is a little in front, sorry, a little in front of the center of effort. So the bulk of the sails for the boat are behind the centerboard. So if the centerboard is the pivot point, then if most of the sails are behind it, then it's going to want to spin up into the wind. If you let go of the tiller, which is true for pretty much every boat, if you let go of a tiller, by design, the boat will spin up into the wind. And that's for performance. And you could also think of it like a safety thing, whereas like if you fall off the boat's just going to kind of like head up into the wind and stop versus sailing straight off into the sunset or sailing downwind and jibing far away from you. There's a lot of reasons you want weather helm on a boat. So since that's by design, rudderless is a lot easier if you have a neutral balance and you can get rid of the weather helm. And thankfully our centerboard's pivot makes it a lot easier. So if you pivot it, you're moving it back, and that changes the point of the center lateral resistance. So then you have more sail area forward of that point. So you can negate the weather helm. If you keep pivoting it, it is possible to give your boat lee helm. But everything goes to shit when you have lee helm on a boat. Does that answer questions you had about weather helm? Or did I miss an aspect? Hull shape less so. The hull itself, since it's like if you raise the centerboard and the rudder, the hull itself is still gonna partially stop the boat from moving sideways through the water just because it's a friction point. So the entire hull itself acts as part of the calculation into where exactly the center of lateral resistance is in the boat, but for the most part it's where the centerboard is, because that's the biggest part that's stopping you from moving sideways. All right, what else? Any question?
We talked about Jake. Then you go.
Well, I'm sorry, I probably missed that part. When you to go out and practice this, do you trim the jib all the way? And just
Yeah,
or do you ease it out? Just like how do you start out?
yeah. So pull it in all the way and let it out 2 or 3 inches and cleat it there, and you never have to worry about it again until you're going to switch, like going tacking and switching sides. And the reason for that comes up in tacking. So I'll run through the tacking procedure real quick again. What you want to do is fall off onto a close reach or even a beam reach, sheet in the main to power up, let the boat heel to leeward a little bit, because when you pull in the main, it's going to want to heel. So let it, and then that'll help the hull drive up through attack. So as you come up to a close hulled course, keep sheeting in slowly, keep your power, keep speeding up. Since the jib's out a few inches, the jib will depower before the main, which means you no longer have anything pushing the bow down. So all of a sudden it's going to round up fast. So the jib depowering like a second before the main makes a huge difference, because now all of a sudden the boat just wants to spin, which just helps you through that tack. So that's why I leave the jib out just a few inches.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then Riley, did you have something too?
Yeah. We talked about the differences between quests and JYs. Do you have any comments on ventures? How that compares?
No, I've only done rudderless on a venture once. I just don't like I don't like the ventures personally, so I just never sail them.
Yeah.
But they're easy boats in general, so it's kind of similar. It's if you can do it on a quest, you could probably do it on a venture, and if you want to check that box, you could go try it one day just to see how it does. But yeah, they're still pretty easy. It's just JYs that are way harder. The Torres are pretty easy too. Definitely reef Torah if you do it. I went out and didn't reef because I was just curious to see. I bought a boat off someone real quick and took it out, and I wanted to see how it did rudderless. And I wished I would have reefed. It would have been way easier. But since the tours have so much more sail area than the quests just don't have a lot of sail. It was just a really powered main for everything, so I could have used less main and less weather helm on that stuff. So if you do a Tora, definitely reef it. The quest, if you're lazy, you could try it without being reefed and just rake the centerboard back like halfway to compensate. But the JYs are harder for everything. In general, I would say if you're a junior, you should only be sailing the JYs. Because quests are just too easy and you're going to learn more on a JY, except when you go through something like Rudderless where you're learning a new skill, go back to the quest until you feel confident there, and then go back to the JY, and you'll realize how much harder it is. You'll be like, I'm great, I got Rudderless down, I got this quest under control, and you go to a JY and it's a shit show. It is so much harder. All right, guys, anything else?
Can you say something about your weight aft or forward? Does that affect
Yeah,
better helm a little bit, or is that minimal?
it affects a little bit. So your main control for steering the boat is the sails, just because they have a bigger effect than boat heel. So after the sails, you have boat heel, to also turn the boat. And then tertiary, but for me, it's a really far tertiary, is weight aft and forward, because it changes which part of the hull is in the water, and it also changes where the centerboard is in relation to the sails in the wind. So it just changes the center lateral resistance, and it kind of changes the center of effort a little bit too. But it's so minimal, I just don't worry about it. Just sit comfortably in the boat. I've never been in a situation where like I couldn't get the boat to do what I wanted, and that was the difference that made it work. So I just don't worry about it. You have so many other controls: sails, boat helm, centerboard. I just wouldn't worry about it. And honestly, I never use it, so I always have to think about it. Like, okay, move forward. It does this to the centerboard and puts the bow in the water, and that affects the CLR this way. And I'm just like, I don't care. It doesn't really matter.
Would it be impossible on a keel boat?
To do rudderless?
Yeah.
No, it's necessary. It's part of the test. You have to be able
Okay.
to sail the keelboat rudderless. Yeah, it's harder. And in high wind, it's really hard because you still have to heel the boat to get below a beam.
Are you
So-
allowed to bring along 15 friends?
So you bring a lot of people and you get everyone hanging off the shrouds to get them below a beam, and you like double reef the main to make sure you don't have too much rounding you up. The commanders aren't bad. You can just let go of the tiller on a commander. And one of my other early points of why do we do this? Because sometimes you'll have to let go of a tiller. I actually did that a lot on a keelboat to deal with stuff because there's so much line and some of it's so long. Sometimes it's easier just to drop the tiller and deal with stuff. And on a commander, it's pretty easy to just drop the tiller and the boat will keep sailing. A Merit's a lot harder. On the Merit, you have to lash the tiller in the center of the boat to do rudderless. Because if you just let it go, it flops to one side and then the boat just does circles. And I've never known of anyone to be able to figure out how to fight that and successfully do it. So you lash the tiller center. On the commander, you can just let it go and it'll do what you want. Which also, to my first point of why do we do this? Because sometimes we lose rudders. Someone lost a rudder on a commander 2 years ago, I think, and had to sail home rudderless. Yeah. Actually, and that happened on someone's senior test too, tacking out of the marina, which is a horrible time to lose a rudder. But they were tacking across the fairway, heading out of the marina, and all of a sudden they lost all rudder. And thankfully he had a couple other people that knew what they were doing on the boat, because that's a rough thing to do during a senior test. All right, got any more? I think we're gonna wrap it up. Got one more?
Well, is there anything special you do with the Van Out Hall in Cunningham? While you're
No,
practicing?
not really. Especially if you're reefed. I think those controls are too like fine-tuned enough that it's not really gonna make much of a difference that you're gonna notice. No, I never really worry about it. Since usually you're reefed That is your out haul, so it's already tight. So the Vang and the Cunningham aren't doing a whole lot to make a difference. Like I said, you're not racing, you're not going for maximum performance. It's not going to make much difference as far as boat control goes.
Give us the last.
Oh, John says on a keelboat, the Traveler is important in attack. That's a good point. Do you raise it all the way to windward at that point? Like when you're getting ready to attack? Because then that would help you keep being powered longer, spinning the boat up. See if you can answer. That'd be my guess. Yeah, if you know you're gonna attack, get the Traveler all the way to the high side. That way the main will stay powered as long as possible as you're attacking. All right,
You mentioned the 5 quick jibes. Is that rudderless or
yeah,
with the rudder?
rudderless.
Okay. And the same with small circles.
Yeah, I mean, it's all up to the teacher. But yeah, being able to do controlled jibes in general, I would assume, and circles. And circles, we didn't talk about circles, but circles rudderless are not pretty and they're not tight. Like they're not as close to the buoy as with a rudder. Like we're not looking for like one boat length perfect circles around a rudder or around a buoy without your rudder. It's kind of like, can you do some circles in general without capsizing and losing complete control of the boat? And it's hard because, as you know, with a good circle, you're moving pretty fast, like tacking, jibing, tacking, jibing. So doing it rudderless is even more work. So it's exhausting. But yeah, I would expect circles and some jibes, some controlled jibes and crew overboard. Pretty much everyone I know at some point had to do crew overboard on a test rudderless.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Good questions, guys. Yeah, just go out and practice. And then if you feel like you're hitting a wall of like having a hard time accomplishing something and you're not sure why, then find someone more experienced. It doesn't have to be a senior. There's a lot of advanced juniors that are about ready to test for senior that rudderless is like what they're hammering on themselves, like just practicing rudderless nonstop, and they're getting really good at it. And are good people to hit up to maybe go out and give you tips because it's all stuff fresh in their mind that they're actively dealing with at the time. Or even another person that's struggling with rudderless. Sometimes you're struggling in different ways. Like you're good at keeping a straight line, but you're really missing all your tacks. And for another person that's opposite, and you can go out together and just figure it out together. But if you get stuck on stuff, just hit people up. Either hit people up for questions or hit them up for go out and practice. All right. Thanks,
Great,
guys.
thanks very much.
Oh, thank you.
All right. See you at
Yeah.
the club.
See you at the club. Bye.
Bye.